My name is Nina Blake, and I'm 34 years old. This is my house. It's nothing grand, just a 3-bedroom place tucked into a quiet corner of Boulder, Colorado. The paint's a little chipped on the front porch railing, the lawn gets patchy in the winter, and the kitchen cabinets could definitely use an upgrade. But I own every inch of it, and after 10 years of slow patient payments, I can finally say that without a single asterisk or monthly reminder hanging over my head. I moved in when I was 24. Back then, this place was a wreck, an old fixer-upper with mold in the basement and a back door that didn't even lock properly. I bought it with more stubbornness than savings. My parents said I was being foolish. My sister laughed and asked why I'd waste my youth on something so stationary. But I had a plan. I didn't need flashy vacations or city skylines. I just wanted something that was mine, something no one could take credit for or take away. I poured myself into this house weekends with paint-stained sweatshirts, weeknights spent learning how to install light fixtures through YouTube tutorials. I skipped brunches, ignored party invites, and kept 2 jobs for the first 4 years just to stay on track. There was no safety net, no shared mortgage, no let's split it down the middle. It was just me slowly building the life I wanted, brick by literal brick. And now this home is more than just a roof over my head. It's a symbol of everything I've survived. It's quiet here, peaceful. I can read without headphones, cook barefoot, and leave the dishes soaking overnight if I want to. There's no chaos, no constant energy buzzing around. Just me, my books, my routine, and a space that finally feels like it matches who I am. Most people don't understand why I live alone. I'm not antisocial. I have friends I go out when I want to, and I'm not against love or marriage. I just haven't found anyone worth rearranging my peace for. And after watching what family sometimes demands, I'm not in any rush to trade my solitude for sacrifice. Take my sister Sierra, for example. She's 29, married to a guy named Evan, and together they've got 2 kids, Luna age 7 and Asher age 5. They're the type of couple who live for the moment. Yoga retreats in Costa Rica, remote work from Thailand. She once said that anyone who stays in one place too long is just slowly dying under capitalism. That was right around the time I was repainting my living room. We've never been close. Not in a dramatic, hostile way, but in that subtle, invisible way where you realize the people you share blood with barely know you at all. She calls me the responsible one, usually with a little smirk like it's a curse. I call her the free spirit usually when I'm explaining why I can't count on her for anything long-term. Still, I never resented her. I figured we just lived different lives with different values. I had my mortgage calculator. She had her passport stamps. It worked. We stayed out of each other's way, until it didn't. Because lately, that peace I built for myself has started to crack. And like most cracks, it started small. A phone call. A casual "can we talk?" A pause just long enough to feel like something was shifting. I didn't know it yet, but my little home, this space I fought so hard to protect, was about to become the battlefield for something much bigger than I'd ever expected. Growing up in my family always felt like being the background noise to someone else's main performance. It wasn't that anyone ever told me I was less important. It was more in the way they forgot to ask how I was doing, or how they always seemed more excited when Sierra walked into the room. I was the quiet one, the organized one, the one who never caused trouble. That might sound like a compliment, but in my house it meant I was easy to overlook. Sierra, on the other hand, had a talent for drawing attention without trying. Even as a kid, she had this wild, magnetic energy. She was the kind of child who would disappear into the woods for hours and return with a crown made of weeds, insisting she was a forest queen. My parents adored her imagination. They called it fearless. When I built a bookshelf for my room at age 12, they said I was too serious for my own good. It only got more obvious as we grew up. I got straight A's, worked part-time through college, and graduated with 0 debt. Sierra dropped out after 3 semesters and backpacked through South America with a boyfriend she'd met on a beach in Florida. My parents called her brave and said she was finding herself. When I got my first promotion at 26, they congratulated me in a text message. When Sierra posted a photo of herself teaching English in Bali, they reposted it on Facebook with heart emojis. It stung sometimes. I won't lie. Not because I wanted their approval as much as I wanted to feel like I wasn't invisible. I wasn't doing anything glamorous, but I was building something real. I was showing up day after day in ways that mattered. But when your value isn't loud or dramatic, people tend to miss it. Still, I learned to live with it. I told myself that my parents were just wired to celebrate noise and movement. I let them brag about Sierra's latest adventure while I quietly paid down another chunk of my mortgage. I stopped expecting them to notice when I made progress and focused on how I felt about my life instead. That helped for a while. But the gap between me and the rest of my family kept growing. Holidays became polite, but distant. Phone calls were rare and usually short. If Sierra joined the call, the tone changed immediately, lighter, more animated. She'd jump in with stories of jungle safaris and local wine tastings, and suddenly I'd become a listener in my own family conversation. I didn't envy her life, but I envied how easily they connected with it. I think the worst part was the way they looked at me, not with judgment exactly, but with confusion. Like they couldn't figure out why someone would willingly choose stability over spontaneity. I'd see it in my mom's tilted head and the way my dad's compliments felt forced, like they were reading from a script that didn't quite make sense to them. "You always were dependable," my mom once said, handing me a lukewarm compliment like it was a pat on the head. So I stopped sharing. Not out of spite, but because it started to feel pointless. If I told them I refinanced my mortgage to shave off 4 years of payments, the response would be silence or a polite, "That's nice." If Sierra texted that she was on a boat in Greece, they'd screenshot it and send it to the family group chat with 20 exclamation points. I was used to being the solid one, the fallback. And maybe a part of me took pride in that. But I never expected that same label, reliable, responsible, self-sufficient, would one day be used against me. That the life I had built, the one they barely noticed, would become the very thing they tried to take advantage of. And at that point, I hadn't even gotten the call yet. Before everything fell apart, I used to tell myself that helping family was just part of being a decent human being. You do it quietly, you don't keep score, you don't expect praise. But over the years, I started to notice a pattern, one that made it harder and harder to ignore the imbalance. Like the time Sierra's car broke down 3 states away, and she called me in the middle of the night asking if I could send money to cover the repairs. I wired her $800 without a second thought. No thank you text, no check-in after she got back home. Just silence, like I'd donated to some faceless cause and moved on. Or when Mom had that health scare and couldn't afford the out-of-pocket fees for a specialist. I put $2,000 on my credit card to cover it. She told Sierra how stressful it had all been, but never once mentioned that I'd helped pay. Then there were the little things. Birthday gifts I picked up for our parents from both of us. Rent money I quietly slid into Sierra's account when she and Evan were figuring things out. I never told anyone, not because I was ashamed, but because I thought that was what love looked like. Being useful, filling gaps, stepping in without being asked. And I think that's what hurt most of all, not the giving, but the invisibility of it. Sierra never offered to pay me back. In her mind, I had it easier, so helping her was just part of the unspoken sibling contract. "You don't have kids," she once said when I asked if she'd ever be able to return the $500 I loaned her. "Your expenses are different." That conversation ended with her changing the subject and me swallowing the lump in my throat. It wasn't about the money. If it had just been about money, I would have cut things off a long time ago. What chipped away at me slowly year after year was the assumption that I would always be available. That my stability was a public utility for the people in my life to draw from whenever they ran short. I remember once overhearing my father say to a cousin, "Nina, oh, she's solid. You can always count on her." And he meant it as a compliment. But it didn't feel like one. It felt like a label I hadn't signed up for. Like I'd been cast in a role I never auditioned for, the one who doesn't need help, doesn't need validation, doesn't need anything. The one who gives and never says, "Hey, I'm running low too." There were times I thought about speaking up. I'd rehearse little scripts in my head, things like, "I'd like some acknowledgement," or "I'm feeling taken for granted." But then Sierra would post a photo from some mountaintop and Mom would text me, "Isn't she just incredible?" And I'd delete the draft message and tell myself to let it go. So I kept giving, not constantly, but consistently, quietly, And over time, I convinced myself it was just easier this way. Fewer arguments, fewer awkward conversations, less disappointment. But deep down, something was shifting. I started to keep track not on paper, but in my mind. I remembered every loan, every favor, every time I changed my plans to accommodate someone else's chaos. I remembered how no one ever asked how I was doing, only if I could do something for them. And I started to wonder if this was love, or just convenience dressed up as family. Looking back, I think part of me already knew what was coming. Not the specifics, not the drama, but the gut sense that one day someone would ask for too much. That I'd finally say no and they wouldn't just be surprised. They'd be furious. It started the way most of Sierra's ideas did, casually, dramatically, and with absolutely no safety net. She called me one evening with that giddy, conspiratorial tone in her voice, the one that always meant she was about to announce something ridiculous and fully expect me to be impressed. "Nina." She said, "We're selling the house." I paused. "What house?" "Our house." She laughed like it was obvious. "The one in Portland. Evan and I have been talking about it for months. We're done with the whole suburban routine. The mortgage, the yard work, the PTA meetings. It's all so soul-crushing. We need something different." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the dent in my fridge door. Different like everything she breathed. We're going to travel the world for a whole year with the kids. I blinked. With Luna and Asher. Yes. This is the perfect time. They're still young, not totally tied to school systems yet. We'll homeschool them on the road, life experience as education. Think about it, sunsets in Greece, marketplaces in Morocco, street food in Thailand. They'll learn so much more than they would sitting in a classroom. There was a beat of silence as I processed. Okay, but where are you going to live when you come back? Are you planning to rent? Put the money somewhere? "We'll figure that out later," she said breezily. "We'll sell the house at a great profit. The market's insane right now. That'll fund the whole trip. Evan's going to freelance. I'll pick up remote gigs and we'll keep it flexible. Minimalism, freedom, adventure. I wanted to be supportive. I really did. But everything about the plan made my stomach twist. They had no savings that I knew of. Evan's freelance career was mostly part-time consulting and the occasional podcast appearance. Sierra had jumped between 6 different remote gigs in the past year, none of which lasted more than a month. And they had 2 small children. But I held my tongue. I'd learned a long time ago that questioning Sierra's decisions only made her dig in harder. So instead, I asked, "Have you talked to Mom and Dad about this?" She scoffed. "Please. They think I should settle down and get a real job. They'll never understand. You get it. You've always been the quiet rebel doing things your own way." I almost laughed. Quiet rebel, I paid property taxes early. I bought the same groceries every week. I hadn't done anything my own way except survive without anyone else's help. But I didn't argue. She ended the call saying, "We leave in 2 months. Everything's already in motion. I'm so excited, Nina. This is going to change everything." And just like that, she was gone. Not literally, not yet, but emotionally, mentally, Sierra had already boarded a plane. The next time I saw her, it was through Instagram stories, the kids waving from an airport gate, Evan balancing a carry-on and a guitar case Sierra, with a wide-brimmed hat and a smoothie in hand. The captions were all breathless optimism. Sold the house, bought freedom, chasing sunsets and finding ourselves, debt-free and dreaming big. I wanted to believe they knew what they were doing. I wanted to believe that despite everything they'd land on their feet. But the realist in me, the one who had spent a decade budgeting, planning, and sacrificing, could already see the cracks forming. You don't sell your entire life without a plan unless you think someone else will catch you when you fall. I just didn't realize yet that Sierra thought that someone was going to be me. For the first couple of months, their feed looked like a dream. Sierra posted daily snapshots of the kids playing on foreign beaches, Evan sipping coffee in narrow cobblestone alleys, plates of vibrant food, rustic rooftops at sunset. Every caption read like something out of a travel magazine, teaching the kids to chase the horizon, unlearning routines, relearning joy. "Freedom looks good on us," the likes poured in. Old classmates commented with fire emojis and heart eyes. Distant cousins shared her posts with captions like goals. My parents, of course, were thrilled, at least online. My mom reposted nearly every photo. Look at Sierra living her best life, she texted me once, attaching a picture of Luna painting a coconut shell somewhere in Bali. I responded with a thumbs up. Meanwhile, my life stayed quiet, structured, normal. I paid off another chunk of my mortgage-filed taxes early and finally fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I baked banana bread, read 2 novels, and watered my garden religiously. No one posted heart emojis about any of that, and that was fine. I didn't need an audience. But the silence from Sierra herself, that hit differently. We barely spoke. Maybe a quick happy birthday text or a blurry photo of the kids sent without context. Nothing meaningful. No, how are you doing? No updates beyond what I could see from the curated snippets online. I told myself she was just caught up in the moment, in motion, in the whirlwind. But deep down, I felt the distance growing, stretching across time zones and expectations neither of us had ever really spoken aloud. I didn't envy her lifestyle. I envied the attention she received for it. I envied the way my parents talked about her as if she were some sort of bold pioneer, while I sat at the dinner table alone on Thanksgiving because they'd flown out to meet Sierra in Italy. That was when it really hit me, that I wasn't just the forgotten sibling anymore. I was the fallback, the background, the assumed safety net. Still, I tried not to be bitter. I reminded myself that Sierra had always been this way, impulsive, idealistic, allergic to structure. And Evan was no different. They were a perfect match in that sense, both chasing a high they couldn't define, pulling the kids along behind them like props in a play they hadn't finished writing. Then, one evening, about 8 weeks into their trip, I noticed a shift. The photos slowed down. No more glowing captions, no more perfectly lit dinners or laughing children on scooters. There were fewer check-ins. The comments under her last few posts started to include questions. Where are you guys now? Everything okay? Haven't seen updates in a while. I tried not to speculate. Maybe they were just enjoying the moment instead of documenting it. Maybe the Wi-Fi was bad. Maybe for once Sierra was choosing real life over performance. But my gut told me something else, and I wasn't wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me told me to pick up. "Hey," Sierra said, voice low, strained. "It's me." I hadn't heard her sound like that in years. I hadn't heard Sierra's voice sound like that since our dad was in the hospital 5 years ago. Hollow, fragile, stripped of all her usual sparkle. "Hey," she repeated when I didn't respond right away. "Do you have a minute?" I walked into the living room and sat down slowly, phone pressed to my ear. "Yeah. What's going on?" There was a long pause. I could hear background noise, kids fussing, a door closing, the low murmur of Evan's voice. Then she let out a shaky breath. "We're back in the States." I blinked. "Already? You said you were doing a full year." "Yeah, well, things didn't exactly go to plan." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Her silence filled in the blanks. "We ran out of money, Nina," she said finally. "A lot faster than we thought we would." There it was. The moment I had been bracing for, the moment my gut had warned me about the second she first said, "We're selling the house." "We thought we had enough from the sale," she continued, words tumbling faster now. "And we tried to keep it budget-friendly, but everything costs more when you've got kids. Food, beds, transportation, everything. And we weren't exactly staying in hostels, you know." Evan kept saying we needed comfort, that we could balance it out later. But she stopped herself. "We've been back for 3 days, she said quietly. "Staying in a motel outside Denver. We're almost completely out of cash. No jobs lined up, no place to go." I felt the shift in her tone right then, like we were tiptoeing up to the real reason she called. She hesitated. "I was wondering if maybe we could stay with you, just for a little while, just until we get back on our feet." I closed my eyes. There it was. The favor that wasn't really a favor. The kind of ask that carried weight no matter how lightly it was wrapped in casual words. I felt the air tighten in my chest as I imagined them here, Sierra and Evan, their 2 kids, the bags, the noise, the disruption. The way this house would stop feeling like mine. I don't know, Sierra, I said slowly. It's a lot. 4 people in this space. It's not exactly roomy. I know she rushed. And we'd make it work. Just 10 months max. We'll get jobs, save up, maybe find a rental nearby. It's just, this is the only option we have right now. 10 months. That wasn't a little while. That was nearly a year. That was a whole pregnancy, 3 seasons, an entire school calendar. That wasn't temporary. That was moving in. I could even help with groceries, she added quickly as if reading my mind. And Evan's willing to do yard work or anything you need around the house. The kids are good, I promise. They'll stay out of the way. I stared at the floor, heart pounding. I wanted to help. I didn't want to be cold, but I also didn't want to say yes and spend the next 10 months resenting every footstep down my hallway. I need to think about it, I said, finally. There was a pause. Okay, she said, but her voice dropped an octave, just enough to let me know she was disappointed. Maybe more than that. Maybe she was already angry. We'll be here at the motel for a few days, she added. Let me know. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, staring out the window. The wind moved through the trees outside, soft and indifferent. My house, my quiet space, my 10-year dream, it suddenly felt fragile, like the thin shell around a life I had carefully, quietly built. And now that shell was cracking. I gave myself the weekend to think. That was more than generous, considering I already knew what my answer would be. But I needed space not just to make a decision, but to brace myself for the fallout. Because saying no to Sierra wasn't like saying no to a stranger. It was saying no to the family mythology we'd all been raised on. Family helps family. Blood is thicker. You don't leave your own behind. But here's the thing, I hadn't been behind when they left. I had been exactly where I was supposed to be here in this modest little house, paying my bills, showing up for everyone in quiet, invisible ways. They were the ones who packed up their lives and cashed in their safety net for a year of sunsets and street food. And now that the money had dried up, they expected to come home to a soft landing. They expected me. So on Sunday evening, I called Sierra back. My palms were sweating. Hey, I said when she picked up. I've thought about it. She was silent on the other end, waiting. Hopeful, expectant. I can't do it, I said gently. The house is small. I have a routine. I've worked really hard for this piece, and I don't think it would be good for any of us. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through bone. Then, wow, Sierra. No, it's fine, she snapped. I get it. You don't want to be inconvenienced. Got it loud and clear. That's not fair. Fair. She laughed, bitter and clipped. You have everything, Nina. A house, no kids, no real responsibilities. And I ask you for one thing, just one, and suddenly you can't handle it. I stood up, pacing the length of my living room like the movement could shake the guilt off my shoulders. I offered to help you look for a rental. I can even pitch in for the first couple months. Oh, so you're going to throw money at us from a distance? That's your idea of support? It's boundaries, Sierra, not punishment. She didn't respond. I could hear her breathing shallow and fast. Then she muttered something under her breath that I couldn't quite make out. What did you say? I said. You've always been like this. Cold, stingy, acting like you're better than the rest of us because you follow all the rules. My throat tightened. I've never thought I was better than you. I've just had to take care of myself because no one else was going to. Spare me the martyr speech, Nina. You're just jealous. That stopped me in my tracks. Jealous. Yeah. You've lived in that boring little bubble for so long you can't stand seeing someone else actually live. You've never taken a risk in your life. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. 10 years of building this life of saying no to vacations and brunches and anything flashy just so I could have something that was mine, and now suddenly I was selfish for protecting it. This isn't about risk, I said quietly. It's about consequences. You made a choice, Sierra, and now you want me to pay for it. I thought family meant something to you. It does, but I won't be punished for drawing a line. She didn't say goodbye. She just hung up. I stood in the silence of my living room, staring at the phone in my hand, heart pounding. The conversation played on repeat in my head, her voice angry and hurt, mine flat and defensive. The space between us had never felt wider, and I had a sinking feeling it was only going to get worse. I sat down suddenly exhausted. A part of me wanted to cry, another part wanted to scream, but mostly I just felt drained. Like I'd poured everything into a cup that had a hole in the bottom. I didn't build this life to fix someone else's mess. And yet somehow I'd become the villain for not volunteering to clean it up. The first call came the next morning. It was Mom. I saw her name flash across the screen as I stirred cream into my coffee. For a brief second, I considered not answering, but avoidance had never worked well in my family. It just gave them more room to narrate your silence however they wanted. So I picked up. "Hi, Mom." "Nina," she said, and just that my name with a tone that already told me I was in trouble. "I talked to Sierra." She continued without waiting for a response. "She said you refused to let them stay with you." I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. "It's not that simple." "Well, explain it to me, because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like your sister and her children are in need, and you said no." "I offered to help financially," I said calmly. "To help them find a rental, even cover the first couple of months. But having 4 extra people in this house for nearly a year, that's not something I can do." There was a long pause then, that familiar sigh, the kind that wrapped itself in disappointment and motherly concern like a backhanded compliment. "Nina, I just don't understand how you can be so cold about this." "I'm not being cold," I said, my voice tightening. "I'm protecting my space, my life. You know how long I worked for this house. You know what it took." "Of course I do," she replied, but her tone didn't soften. "But what's the point of having all that if you can't use it to help your own family?" That question hit hard. And not because it was fair, but because it wasn't. "You think I haven't helped?" I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "You think I haven't supported Sierra over the years quietly, without ever asking for anything in return?" "I'm not saying you haven't," Mom said quickly, "but this is different. This is serious. They're struggling, the kids I cut her off, and I'm struggling too. Maybe not financially, but emotionally, mentally. I've been carrying the quiet weight of this family for a decade, Mom. And the one time I set a boundary, suddenly, I'm the bad guy. That's not what I'm saying. But it was. Not in so many words, but it was there in the sighs, in the tone, in the very fact that she was calling me to plead Sierra's case instead of just asking how I was holding up. We ended the call on a brittle truce. She said she'd pray about it. I said I needed some space. Neither of us meant it. An hour later, my dad called. He didn't bother with guilt. He went straight for the jugular. "Is it true you're leaving your sister and her family to rot in a motel?" "Dad, she's got 2 kids. Nina. 2. And you're sitting in a 3-bedroom house all by yourself." "It's my house," I said sharply, and I offered support in other ways. "I'm not throwing them out, I'm just not letting them move in." "Back in my day," he said, his voice rising, "we didn't turn our backs on family. We didn't hide behind boundaries like it was some magic word that excused selfishness. That one got to me, because no matter how prepared I thought I was, nothing could dull the sting of being told by your own father that saying no made you a failure." He didn't listen to my explanations. He didn't care that I'd already sacrificed in 100 invisible ways. All he saw was that I had space, and Sierra didn't, and to him that made it black and white. Eventually I hung up on him. It wasn't proud, but it was necessary. My hands were shaking my throat tight. I stood in the middle of my kitchen and stared at the phone like it might ring again and apologize for everything it had just said, but it didn't. That day I didn't leave the house. I didn't answer any more calls. I just sat in the home I'd worked so hard to build, wondering how I'd gone from being the reliable one to the villain in everyone's story practically overnight. And something inside me began to shift. This wasn't just about Sierra anymore. This was about the entire system of expectations I'd been born into, and the quiet, dangerous idea that my needs didn't matter unless someone else had already met theirs. By Tuesday, I'd stopped counting how many calls or texts had come in. My phone buzzed like a smoke alarm, and every new notification filled me with dread. It wasn't just my parents anymore. It was cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, a neighbor who'd somehow heard about the situation, and even a coworker who pulled me aside and whispered, "Your sister, okay? I saw something on Facebook." I hadn't seen it yet. Sierra had apparently gone public, but before I even got to the post, before I saw what she'd broadcast to the world, my father called again. This time his tone was colder, less angry, more disappointed, like I'd let him down on some deep unspoken level. "You've always thought you were better than everyone," he said flatly. "What? All that quiet pride. Your house, your job, your perfect little life, and now your sister's in trouble and you're sitting back with your arms crossed. Dad, that's not what's happening. You think being stable gives you the right to withhold help. I think being stable means I've earned the right to protect my peace," I snapped. "You keep acting like I've turned my back on them, but I haven't. I just won't let them move in and uproot everything I've built." There was a pause on the line. Then, in a low voice, he said, "She has kids, Nina. They're your niece and nephew. I know who they are. So act like family." I stood in my kitchen staring at the patch of floor I'd refinished last spring with my own 2 hands. I remembered the hours I'd spent bent over that tile, measuring, cutting, sealing, making something that would last. "They're not my responsibility," I said finally. There was silence. Then he muttered, "You're not who I thought you were," and hung up. That one landed hard. I sat down on the edge of my couch, phone still in my hand, and just stared at the wall. It was like the walls of my house were closing in, not from people physically moving in, but from the emotional weight of the accusations piling up at the door. Even my mother, who usually tried to stay neutral in family conflicts, had started echoing Sierra's words in her texts. "We're just worried about them. They don't have anywhere else to go. Please reconsider. This is what sisters are for." No one was asking how I was sleeping. No one was asking if I felt okay being pressured, judged, and painted as the heartless one just because I'd finally said no. And then I opened Facebook. It was worse than I expected. Sierra had written a long emotional post about falling on hard times and learning who truly has your back. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. Anyone who knew us could read between the lines. The comment section was flooded with sympathy and outrage from people who didn't know the details, didn't know me, and certainly didn't know that I'd already offered help in the only way I could. I scrolled through dozens of responses before slamming my phone down on the table. My hands were shaking. My throat burned with a mix of anger and grief. What had started as a boundary was now being treated like a betrayal. I wanted to scream, not just at Sierra, but at my parents, at the family members blindly taking her side, at the very idea that self-preservation was somehow selfish, that because I had built a life of stability, I was now obligated to give it away. It was like they'd all gathered around a sinking boat and decided I was the lifeboat, and didn't care if I sank in the process so long as someone else stayed afloat. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge and the wind outside. This house, my sanctuary, no longer felt like protection. It felt like a stage where everyone had cast me as the villain. But deep down, a small voice kept whispering, "You're not wrong. You're just finally not saying yes." And for once, I let that voice be louder than the guilt. The doorbell rang on a Saturday morning. I was still in my pajamas, hair pulled into a lazy bun mug of coffee in one hand. I hadn't even checked my phone yet. No emotional landmines, no notifications from extended family, no passive-aggressive texts from Mom. Just the early peace of a weekend morning. Until that chime. I wasn't expecting anyone. I don't get surprise visitors. My friends know to text first. My neighbors wave from a distance but keep to themselves. The moment I heard that sound, something in my gut tightened. I walked slowly to the door, unsure whether to be annoyed or afraid. When I opened it, the sight on my front porch made my stomach drop. Sierra stood there with Evan behind her. Luna and Asher were clinging to their legs, half asleep, hair messy, each of them clutching a backpack. Their luggage sat in a small pile near the steps, 2 suitcases, a diaper bag, and what looked like a collapsible stroller. Evan had a forced smile on his face. Sierra looked like she was trying hard to seem hopeful. "Hey," she said softly, like this wasn't completely insane. We thought we'd come talk in person. I blinked. You're here. She nodded. Yeah, we're just in town for a bit. Figured we could stop by. We didn't want to surprise you, but things have been really tense over the phone. This was a surprise, and she knew it. I looked past her at the kids. Luna gave me a sleepy wave. Asher was rubbing his eyes. You drove all the way here, we're staying nearby. Evan jumped in quickly. It's not far. Just figured we'd stop by, clear the air. Talk face to face. Except I already knew what this was. This wasn't about clearing the air. This was a performance, a strategic ambush. I stepped outside onto the porch, pulling the door mostly shut behind me. I didn't want them mistaking the gesture as an invitation. You should have called, I said, keeping my voice even. I know, Sierra replied, biting her lip. But I thought, maybe if we just saw each other, really saw each other, it would remind you what this is about. What is this about? I asked. Because to me, it feels like it's about manipulation. Her eyes widened like I'd slapped her. Nina, I'm just asking you to open your heart a little. Just a little. We're family. You have space. We need it. It's 10 months less if we're lucky. 10 months. She kept saying it like it was a week. Like this wasn't my entire life, my home, my privacy, my mental health. Like it was just a little favor. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I'm not changing my mind, I said more firmly this time. Evan stepped forward. We'd be out of your way during the day. We can help around the house. I'm handy. I can fix things, cook whatever. You wouldn't even notice we were here. I almost laughed. There are 4 of you. You think I wouldn't notice? Sierra's jaw tightened. I'm trying to make this work, Nina. I'm standing here showing up doing the mature thing, and you're just shutting us out. I felt heat rising in my chest. You didn't show up to talk. You showed up to corner me, and now you're using the kids as props, hoping I'll feel too guilty to say no. Her face flushed. Don't you dare say that. Then stop acting like it's my job to fix this, I snapped. You made the choice to sell your house. You made the choice to spend the money. And now you want me to erase the consequences of those choices because you don't like where they landed you. Asher started to cry. Luna's lip trembled. And just like that, the guilt came roaring back. But I held my ground. I didn't build this life so other people could wreck it and move in when it's convenient. Sierra's eyes narrowed. You've changed. No, I said. I finally stopped apologizing for not being who you wanted. They didn't say anything else. They gathered their bags, turned slowly, and walked down the steps. Luna looked back once. I gave her a soft wave. It wasn't her fault, but that didn't mean I was going to open my door. Not this time. It was supposed to be over after they left my porch. I thought I'd made myself clear. I thought the door closing gently not slammed would be the end of it. I expected some angry texts, maybe another emotional post on social media. What I didn't expect was for them to come back the next day. This time, they didn't ring the bell. I was watering the plants in the front yard when I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. I turned, and there was Luna alone, standing just a few feet away on the gravel path, holding a crumpled drawing in her hand. My heart jumped. Luna, I said, confused. Where's your mom? She's in the car with Asher, she replied, pointing down the street. They said I should come say hi. I glanced past her. Sure enough, Sierra and Evan were sitting in the car parked halfway down the block. The engine was running, and Sierra was watching us through the windshield. Of course she was. I crouched down, trying to keep my voice light. You walked here by yourself? She nodded, handing me the paper. I drew your house. Mommy said we might live here soon, so I should practice drawing it. My breath caught. I looked at the drawing, rough, childish lines in purple crayon. A little box with a triangle roof, 2 windows, and 4 stick figures. One of them had short hair and glasses. That was me. You said, your mom told you that I asked carefully. Uh-huh, Luna said, smiling like this was the best news in the world. She said we're moving in and I get to share a room with Asher, but only until we find a better place, and that you're just being silly for now, but you'll say yes soon. My hands tightened around the drawing. It was one thing to pressure me, to guilt-trip me, to twist my parents and the internet and half our family against me, but using a child. That was something else entirely. I stood up, taking Luna's hand gently. "Let's walk you back to the car, okay?" She nodded and skipped beside me, humming some song I didn't recognize. As we approached, Sierra stepped out of the passenger seat, acting surprised. "Oh, you found her," she said quickly, brushing her hair back. "She got a little too excited, just ran off. She said you told her you were moving in," I said flatly. Sierra's smile wavered. Kids exaggerate. She had a full story. She said I was just being silly for now. Her words, not mine. Evan stepped out then, rubbing the back of his neck like this was all getting a little awkward. "Look, Nina, don't blow this out of proportion. We were just trying to give the kids something to hold on to. It's been a lot of instability lately." "You told your daughter you were moving into my house," I repeated, each word sharper than the last, "before I ever agreed. Before I ever gave you any reason to believe that would happen." Sierra sighed. "We didn't mean to pressure you. We just needed her to feel safe." "By lying to her." "It's not lying," she shot back. "It's hopeful planning." I stared at her stunned. Hopeful planning. I looked at Luna now, back in the back seat, humming to herself and swinging her feet. She had no idea what was going on, no idea that her mom had handed her a role in a family manipulation strategy, no idea that she'd just become a pawn in a game she didn't even know was being played. "Don't ever send her up to my door like that again," I said, my voice low and shaking. "I'm serious, Sierra. Don't use your daughter to soften me. Don't plant ideas in her head you have no right to promise. I'm not changing my answer. Not now. Not ever." Sierra's expression hardened. "Wow. You really are heartless." "No," I said. "I'm just not your backup plan." I turned and walked away back into my house, locking the door behind me. I leaned against it, breathing hard as the car engine faded down the street. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, my house finally felt like mine again. But only for now, because I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. It had been 4 days since Sierra last showed up. 4 days of silence. No calls, no texts, no Luna at my doorstep with drawings and forced innocence. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt tense, like the silence wasn't peace, but pressure building somewhere just out of view. Then on Thursday morning, a letter arrived. Not a handwritten apology, not a final plea, no. It was a manila envelope from a property management company I didn't recognize. At first I thought it was junk mail, until I saw my full legal name typed neatly in the corner. Inside was a printed copy of a residential lease agreement. I flipped through the pages, scanning details, my heart starting to race. It was for an apartment in downtown Denver. 2-bedroom, small unit, modest price point. Move-in date 3 weeks ago. Co-signers Sierra Blake and Nina Blake. I froze. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even known about this apartment. My signature was printed, not handwritten, and it looked eerily clean, almost too perfect. It wasn't just forged. It was strategically placed. There was also a note from the leasing office stapled to the back. "We are contacting all co-signers regarding outstanding unpaid rent. Please respond within 7 business days to avoid escalation." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. I had to read through the packet twice before I could fully process what had happened. Sierra had listed me as a co-signer. Maybe she thought she could float under the radar, that no one would ever follow up, or that they'd get approved and pay on time and I'd never have to know. But something had gone wrong, missed payments probably, and now my name was caught in the fallout. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a guilt trip. This wasn't emotional blackmail or a dramatic Facebook post. This was fraud. It was a line I hadn't expected her to cross. I called the property manager immediately and explained as calmly as I could that I had never signed or authorized anything. The woman on the line sounded sympathetic but firm. "You'll need to provide proof of identity, a sworn affidavit denying the signature, and likely involve a lawyer if they decide to escalate." I hung up and just sat at my dining table staring at the pages. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the wind chime outside tapping against the porch. Normal things. Background noise to a life that up until now had felt stable. I'd spent my whole life being the responsible one. The one who never made waves, who paid bills on time, who avoided drama at all costs. And somehow I was now tangled in a legal mess I hadn't created because my sister couldn't draw a boundary between desperation and deception. I thought about calling her, demanding answers, screaming, crying something, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out a folder from my filing cabinet, one I hadn't touched in years, and started collecting everything I'd need my ID proof of my actual signature bank statements. I called a friend who worked in law and asked for a referral. I opened a case number. I documented every page. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just setting a boundary. I was enforcing it with paperwork, not words. And the part that cut the deepest, I wasn't even surprised. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I'd always known this was possible. That Sierra's recklessness wasn't just dramatic, it was dangerous. She hadn't just tried to move into my house, she'd tried to steal my name. And I was done letting her borrow pieces of me like they didn't cost anything. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the lease about my name typed out on a contract I never saw, never signed, never agreed to. I thought about Luna's drawing, about the look in Sierra's eyes when I said, "Not now, not ever." I thought about the silence from my parents who still hadn't called since the blow-up, so I did something I'd never done before. I posted my side of the story. It wasn't petty, it wasn't cruel, just the truth, calm, direct, and heartbreakingly honest. I didn't mention Sierra's name. I didn't need to. The people who mattered would connect the dots. I wrote, "Sometimes being the responsible one means people assume you'll always say yes, that you'll always be the backup plan. But when you finally say no, they don't hear it as a boundary, they hear it as betrayal. Saying no doesn't make you cruel. It doesn't erase everything you've done quietly for years in the background. It just means you're finally choosing yourself. And if protecting your peace turns you into the villain in someone else's story, maybe it was never your story to begin with." I hovered over the post button for a long time before I clicked it. And then, the comments started coming in. Some were vague but kind. "Needed this today." Wow, this hit hard. Others were sharper, more specific. "It's exhausting being the one who always holds everything together. You're allowed to have boundaries even with family." People were listening, people were relating, and for the first time since all this had started, I didn't feel like I was drowning in a sea of judgment. I felt seen. Of course, it didn't take long for Sierra to respond privately, not publicly. A string of texts. "Wow. Can't believe you'd air our dirty laundry. You think that makes you look good? I hope your peace keeps you warm at night." I didn't reply, because I wasn't interested in arguments anymore. I wasn't interested in defending myself to people who had already decided I was wrong for protecting my life, my space, and my name. I didn't post for revenge. I posted to reclaim my voice. And even if it rattled the cage Sierra had tried to keep me in, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going back inside it. By the next morning, the ripple had become a wave. My post had made its rounds not just among friends, but family. Aunts, cousins, second cousins I hadn't seen since childhood reunions. They were all chiming in. Some messaged privately, others commented publicly, and the responses were divided. A few were subtle jabs. There are always two sides. Others more direct. "I just don't get how you could turn your back on family." But some, thank God, were voices of reason. No one talks about how draining it is to always be the strong one. Boundaries are not betrayal. One comment stopped me in my tracks. It came from Rachel, my cousin from Mom's side. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered she'd always been the quiet one at family gatherings, kind, observant, unnoticed. Her comment was simple: "I remember when you paid off Grandpa's funeral costs and never told anyone. You've always shown up, even when no one saw it." I stared at it for a long time, because that was it, that was the part no one ever talked about. The invisible work, the behind-the-scenes support, the giving that didn't come with hashtags or heart emojis, and it reminded me I wasn't selfish. I was just tired of being only useful. So when my dad finally called again, voice quieter this time, not angry but strained, I didn't answer right away. I let it go to voicemail, because I wasn't ready to explain myself again. Not to people who only heard me when I was silent and only noticed my presence when I refused to be used. For once, I wanted the truth to speak for itself. And maybe it finally was. It came from someone I didn't expect. I was scrolling through the growing thread beneath my post, trying not to let the mix of support and judgment wear me down, when I saw a name I hadn't thought about in years: Marcy Reynolds. Marcy was my old manager from my first full-time job. She wasn't family, not even really a friend. But she had known me during one of the hardest stretches of my life when Dad had his heart surgery, when I was working overtime to pay off my student loans and still sending money to help with hospital bills. Her comment was short, public, and it landed like a stone dropped into still water. I remember when Nina turned down a promotion to stay close to her family. She never bragged, never asked for credit, but she always showed up for everyone else. Maybe it's time someone showed up for her. It silenced the noise. I read it 3 times before I let myself breathe, because here it was, proof from someone outside the bubble of obligation and blood that I wasn't imagining things, that my sacrifice hadn't been invisible to everyone, that at least one person had seen the weight I carried. And unlike the accusations from my sister or the guilt from my parents, this came with no agenda. Just a quiet truth from someone who had witnessed my life when it was hard and unglamorous and still worth defending. A few people liked the comment. Someone else replied, "That says a lot." And for the first time in days, I felt something shift. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Someone had said the thing I couldn't say without sounding bitter, that I had already done more than enough. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to stop proving that to people who refused to see it. The silence that followed wasn't the same as before. It wasn't heavy or tense. It didn't feel like waiting for the next knock on the door or the next guilt-laced message to light up my phone. It was different this time, intentional, chosen. Like my boundaries had finally taken root and no one was pushing at them, for now. I slept in for the first time in weeks. I didn't check my phone the moment I woke up. I made pancakes just for myself and ate them in bed while the sun poured through the curtains. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. That feeling, not owing, was new. I started doing little things to reclaim the peace I'd nearly lost. I moved the guest room furniture around, turning it into the reading space I'd always wanted. I went to the nursery and picked out a new indoor plant, something leafy and wild that didn't follow neat lines or rules. It made the house feel alive again, not like a fortress I'd had to defend. And I talked to someone, a therapist, just once to start. She didn't ask me to explain everything all at once. She just said, "Tell me what hurt the most." And I told her. I told her about being the reliable one, the invisible one, the strong one. I told her about the lease, about the little girl on my porch, about the way saying no had made everyone act like I was breaking the family apart. She listened, no judgment, no sides. And when I was done, she said softly, "Maybe you weren't breaking anything. Maybe you were just refusing to keep holding something that was already cracked." That stayed with me, because maybe I wasn't selfish. Maybe I was just done bleeding for people who never noticed I was cut. A week later, my parents showed up. No call, no text, just a knock at the door on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. I knew it was them before I opened it. There's a weight to their presence I could feel through the walls. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mom stood there with her arms crossed, eyes tired. Dad lingered behind her, his expression unreadable. For once, neither of them looked angry. They looked unsure, like they weren't sure which version of me they were about to meet. I didn't invite them in. I stepped outside instead, letting the door close behind me. "We just wanted to talk," Mom said carefully. I nodded. "Okay." There was a long silence. Then she added, "We've been thinking a lot about how things played out." Dad cleared his throat. "We may have said some things we shouldn't have." I crossed my arms, not to be defensive, but to hold myself steady. "You didn't just say things. You chose a side. And it wasn't mine." They looked at each other, then back at me. Mom spoke first. "We weren't fair to you. We expected too much. Assumed too much. And I'm sorry." That word sorry landed like a stone in still water. Ripples, shock, relief. Dad exhaled through his nose. "We didn't realize how much we'd put on you. Over the years. Not just now." I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. Because I'd already done the hardest part, choosing myself. "You don't have to fix it all today," I said. "But I need you to understand I'm not the fallback anymore." Mom nodded slowly. "We understand now." They left after a few minutes. No drama, no pressure, and for the first time in a long, long time, I believed them. The next morning I opened every window in the house. It wasn't just about letting in the air. It was about making space. It was about clearing out the tension that had settled into the corners of every room like dust I hadn't noticed until the sun hit it just right. I started in the guest room. For so long I'd kept it ready just in case. Sheets folded, closet half empty, an extra toothbrush tucked in the drawer. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd always expected someone else's needs to arrive unannounced, and I'd kept a part of my home, of myself, open for them. But not anymore. I boxed up the old linens, dropped off the spare toiletries at a shelter, and took down the framed quote on the wall that read, "This house runs on love and second chances." I replaced it with a canvas print I bought months ago, but never hung, just a simple, abstract painting in deep blue and gold. Peaceful. Quiet. Mine. Room by room, I made the house mine again. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, moved the armchair to face the window instead of the hallway, put fresh flowers in the kitchen, cleaned the baseboards even though no one would notice but me. It wasn't just about cleaning, it was about claiming. I even found myself humming as I worked. Not because everything was perfect now, but because it was finally mine again. Not just the space, not just the mortgage, but the energy inside it. The freedom to say no, the freedom to protect what I built. When I finished, I stood in the middle of my living room and took a long, slow breath. No guilt, no shame, just stillness and a quiet kind of joy. These days, my life is quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet it used to be. It's not the kind where I shrink myself to avoid conflict or keep the peace by staying silent. It's the kind I've earned, the kind that comes after the storm when you realize you survived it without giving away the core of who you are. I still go to work, still tend to my plants, still drink my coffee slow in the mornings. But something is different now. There's no more waiting for the other shoe to drop, no more leaving space for people who only show up when they need something, no more pretending I'm okay being invisible, because I'm not, and I never should have had to be. For a long time, I thought that being strong meant saying yes, that being dependable meant always making room even when it left me cramped and breathless. But strength, I've learned, also means choosing when to close the door. And knowing that love without boundaries isn't love, it's sacrifice. I haven't heard from Sierra since the last message she sent. "Hope you're happy now." And you know what I am. Not in a spiteful, I won kind of way, just in the quiet, grounded kind of way that comes from knowing you made the hard choice. And it was the right one. This life I've built, it's not glamorous. It doesn't come with passport stamps or dramatic stories, but it's mine. Fully, finally, and without apology. I used to think setting boundaries would make people love me less. But the truth is, the people who only love you when you say yes, when you're useful, convenient, agreeable, never really loved you to begin with. They loved the version of you that made their life easier. What I've learned is this: saying no doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. And being honest about your limits is the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for the people who truly care about you. My peace isn't something I owe anyone. Neither is my space or my silence. And if protecting those things means disappointing people who once expected me to bend, then so be it. I'm not here to be everyone's safety net. I'm here to live a life that doesn't drain me just to keep someone else afloat. And that finally feels like enough. If you're still listening, still reading, still holding on through all the messy parts of this story, then maybe like me, you know what it feels like to be the strong one. The reliable one. The one who doesn't cause trouble, who keeps things together, who gets overlooked because you're too steady to worry about. And then one day, you say no just once, and suddenly people act like you've burned the whole house down. That's what happened to me. But here's what I've learned: setting boundaries doesn't make you difficult. It makes you brave. We grow up believing that love looks like sacrifice. That family means always saying yes, that being good means being small, flexible, quiet. But real love, healthy love, doesn't ask you to betray yourself. And you don't have to break just to be accepted. So if you're in that place now, if your silence has become expected, if your kindness has turned into currency for someone else's comfort, if your yes has become the leash they pull when things fall apart, this is your permission to stop. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. You're allowed to outgrow the roles they handed you. And no, it won't always feel good at first. The people who relied on your self-abandonment won't thank you for leaving it behind. They may call you selfish, distant, heartless. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means they never truly saw you in the first place. So here's my message to you, whoever you are. You don't have to prove your worth by bleeding quietly. You don't have to carry everything just to be enough. You already are. You always have been. And now, it's time to reclaim what's yours, your space, your voice, your peace. If this story felt like yours, then maybe it's time to write the next chapter for yourself. Not one where you're cast as the fallback or the fixer, but one where you're the main character, living boldly, choosing wisely, and finally putting yourself first. Because you're not alone, and you never have to apologize for choosing to live life on your terms.